Okay, the next item on our agenda is the public hearing for a conditional use permit and site plan for a proposed wireless cell tower submitted by SiteQuest at the site of the First Branch Church on Market Avenue North.
Do I have to administer
Yes.
this oath, Tim? At this time?
I'm sorry.
Do I have to administer this oath at this time for the group?
Yes, you may as well just do it for the group, get it added.
So those who wish to take this oath, if you'll just stand, face me, and raise your right hand. And no one is compelled to take the oath, but it must be clear before you begin any comments or testimony whether you are or are not under oath. I state your name. Do solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony I shall give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Clayton Michael Pitcher. I go by my middle name, Mike. We are, I'm an engineer for SiteQuest Limited. We are the architects and engineers for TowerCo and Verizon Wireless for this tower project at First Branch Church. First thing I want to let you know is that I have a cold and I've got a little bit of laryngitis, so if my voice breaks up and you can't hear me, please just say something and I will try to repeat myself as best I can. In front of you tonight is another application for a new cell tower, this one being at First Branch Church. There was a previous application that was made and was approved by the Planning Commission a few months ago relative to the same project. But since that time, we have reorganized, resituated the tower and everything inside our compound area, although our compound area remains the same. It is resituated such that we meet all the requirements for the city's telecommunications ordinance. Now, what we have done from that previous time is we've changed the radio shelter to a platform, and likewise we have shifted the location of the tower such that it is the mandatory 300 feet away from any property line. Now, previously, when we did make the application, the tower was 290 feet away from the southern property line or the Canton City line, Canton City, North Canton City line. Since that time, we moved it the additional 10 feet, so we're not in violation of that standard, and we do comply with all those setbacks.
Okay, pause for one moment here. Have you withdrawn your original?
We haven't done anything in writing relative to that, and should you want us to say during the public hearing that yes, we have withdrawn, you can make that an official notice that we have withdrawn the previous application. Now, the application in front of you tonight is the same location, same lease area, same everything, except for the things that are inside the compound, the tower, and likewise the elimination of the radio shelter and going with a platform with cabinetized radios on that platform. As you can see on the site plan, there's our access easement coming in the driveway for First Branch Church. There's the church building itself, and there, of course, is the compound for the site, and likewise our incoming utilities coming off of Market Avenue North. If you're familiar with the church property at all, we do show the ball fields that are on there. This is the boundary line between Canton and North Canton, and here are some of the residential lots in Canton and the Montebello subdivision. The compound itself, as I mentioned, is still the whole plate shaped type lease area that we had previously. And like our previous application, we do have the required, requisite arborvitae or landscaping around the perimeter of the site, along with the, there will be a wooden fence use a sample of the wooden fence, 8 foot tall, shadow box type fence board on board, be stained to whatever the commission might necessarily want. But we usually try to go with something that's kind of a neutral tone, either a tan or a brown, something of that nature is our usual. I've shown it here in the tan color. Like I mentioned, the fence will end up being 8 feet in height. The arborvitae themselves will be installed at 6 feet, but it may grow as high as 8 to 10 feet, depending on what species we might necessarily use. There will be no trees removed for this construction, and there will be minimal grading right within the compound area, and then likewise we'll have the trenching for our utilities coming in, but that will be the only ground disturbance. As part of our application, and this was something that was supplemented to the city through the planning department, there was a request by the city engineer to give the city engineer some type of drainage, sedimentation, runoff plan, a drainage plan of some type. The concern there, of course, was the fact that there are wetlands just outside the boundary of where our lease area is at, and I think the interest there is making sure that there's no sediment or no additional filling of that wetlands area. I can guarantee you by the plan that we have put together, there will be no requirement for grading outside of our lease area, and there will be no sediment deposits going into the wetlands area. As part of our construction plan, we will have silt fencing going around the entire perimeter of the site compound and along where our trench is at on the downslope in order to be able to catch any sediment from our excavation. And to go along with that, to minimize the amount of runoff going in that direction, when we do the tower foundations construction, this will end up being a drilled pier. It is a caisson type foundation. When they drill that, they will have to pump water out as they're putting concrete into the hole. When they do that, to eliminate any kind of runoff or sediment-laden runoff back into the lower area, into the wetlands area, we're going to use a sediment bag, a dewatering sediment bag. If you've ever seen those before, they're purposely manufactured so that when you do have pumping on a construction site, that it goes into a filtered bag there where it collects the sediment, but lets the water run out to where it naturally would go. Now, also the compound, as far as the interior is concerned, as I mentioned, there is rather than the standard radio shelter that Verizon normally uses, they're starting to convert the way that they are going to be constructing their sites. In this particular case, the radio shelter will not be used as you previously approved in the previous application, but this one will be a raised steel platform. The platform, I've got a picture of it, and likewise I have a drawing that I did want to end up presenting to the board. This is a photo, and I'll give it to you. This is a photo of it, and I have a cross-sectional view of that platform also, showing the canopy over top of it, and the way the raised steel platform is with the grading surface. Now, the steel platform will actually have cabinets on it that will operate the cell site for Verizon. Now, the tower itself, the previous application, we had applied for a 150-foot tall structure. In this case, we're trying to minimize that tower height, and we did reduce it in accordance with the request that we ended up making to the RF engineers with Verizon, and lowering it by 10 feet and going down to 140 feet. That helped in a couple of different senses. It lowers the height as far as the overall structure, as far as view is concerned, but it also, as far as our having to shift the tower to the north by about 10 feet to get the 300-foot setback that we were looking for, it made it a little bit closer to a planned expansion that the church is hoping for at some point in time. We did is we shortened the height of the tower by 10 feet and likewise reduced that setback to that future expansion. Now, as far as the tower structure is concerned, 140-foot steel tower, the tower will be painted in accordance with the telecommunications ordinance that the city of North Canton has. and that color will end up being a very light gray. The tower will come galvanized. What usually happens is that galvanizing is usually pretty shiny and it dulls to a dark gray. In this case, we're going to be painting this tower so it helps to blend into our normally gray skies. The tower itself, 140 feet, steel structure, it's a tapered shape, approximately 3 feet in the base, and at the top of the structure, 140 feet, it's about 1.5 feet in diameter. At the top of the tower, there will be a platform for the mounting of the antennas, and likewise, any cabling to go in between the platform and where the antennas would be located will be inside the shell of the tower. Now, previously, you may remember when we ended up making our previous application, there was one thing, there's one design feature of the tower that I want you to understand. We can control, in case there were ever a tower failure, and I must admit I've been involved in the industry for 30 years and I've never seen a tower fail, at least in any of the jobs that I have worked on myself. I've seen some results of tower failure, but nothing catastrophic that you might be thinking. Now, what we're looking at trying to do, and what we can do design-wise, is control the failure of the tower should it buckle under, wind load. The tower comes in usually about 50-foot sections, and they stack them one on top of the other. And there's a slip type form. As you can tell, it's a tapered shape, so the section below is a little bit smaller diameter than the section that's going to slip over top. So this area, a new structure of this type in this area. As part of the application, there was a small narrative, and there was a before and an after RF propagation map that did show the hole in the coverage that Verizon has in this area and the need, and likewise how this new site will actually propagate and cover the hole that they have here.
Sir, in that this significant gap, I'm colorblind, but could you identify some of the portions? I think the white portions are the ones where you're stating that there is no
right.
Coverage.
I know it's difficult to tell because it's all blended colors together, but if you take a look at the before plot, you can see where the white portions are, and likewise where the orange section is. Orange does not have as much coverage as where the yellow is at. Where you see the yellow on the map, that is where they actually have a cell site. You can see where it propagates better around where that site is at. And as you get further away from where that tower is at, then of course that signal diminishes. There's quite a distance between the two adjacent cell sites or the surrounding cell sites, and that's what's creating this gap in coverage and capacity for that. On the after, you can see how there's a bigger yellow blob right here between the two cell sites that's pulling that coverage together.
And in the areas now that the rationale for the tower, what is it that you're experiencing as far as the gap? Or does this result in...
What problem are they
Yes, do you have
experiencing?
customer complaints for drop calls and so forth?
I think the problem that Verizon has, and I haven't talked to the radio engineers at length, but the description that I got from them is their problem is twofold. Number one, as you can see where the white spots are at, those are coverage-related problems. The other problem that they have too is their data channels, and especially when they ended up going 4G, LTE, a lot of data that people are using, the more wireless data they use, the more congested the cell sites get. And what they need to do is cell split. They put a cell site in between the other cell sites that are surrounding that area in order to be able to draw some of that data traffic or voice traffic off of those adjacent cell sites, offloading those adjacent cell sites where they'll be operating better, and likewise having this additional coverage and additional capacity with the new site.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Slav?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, one thing that we did not have last time that I did want to end up presenting to you tonight, we did take some photos around the neighborhood, from around the church and from the Montebello Estates subdivision. And what we do occasionally, and in this case we did, is create some photo simulations so that you can see exactly how that tower is necessarily going to fit into the landscape, or where it's going to be, and how that's going to be viewed. I have 3 different photos on 2 different boards. One of them's on the back, the other board. One of them from the north side of the church, facing south, where the site's going to be located. That is this one. Another one from Market Avenue, looking to the west, where the site is located. And there's a barrier of trees between Market Avenue and the site. So I had to pick a gap in the trees in order to be able to even show the tower, or how it might necessarily look. And then likewise, last but not least, one from 52nd Street, I'm not sure that's it, but in Montebello Estates, looking from the nearest street back over to where the site is located. I'm going to give these to you so that you can pass those around and take a look. Now, I know I mentioned that there was a drainage plan that was submitted. I'm not sure if you have received that from the planning office. I'm not sure, Mr. Bowles, if you had submitted that to the planning commission.
That was distributed.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that they have a copy of that. Yeah, and also, do they have the approval letter from the city engineer's office?
Just received that.
They just received that? Okay, very, very good. All right, that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer whatever you got.
We will get to you.
Okay.
Eric, any comments from your?
Just some minor comments. Obviously, we reviewed this at the last meeting. There has been some changes that Mr. Fisher pointed out. The setback is now 301 feet from the property lines for the residential. As we discussed early on at the last review of this, they did provide the requirements for the FCC. The National Environmental Policy Act did comply with that. National Historic Preservation Act, the FAA, and the intent of structures, they provided documentation on that. They have submitted a good application where they address all the issues in Chapter 1157, inasmuch as the cell tower is a conditional use in the city of North Canton. We regulate those as conditional use in a number of districts. Park Institutional is one where this is located. As you know, we don't permit cellular towers, wireless communication towers in our districts. Once again, they did address the setbacks as far as the fencing and the screening requirements were met. The tower is 140 feet, the maximum is 200 feet. They did submit a survey plat, and under Chapter 1157.05, we do require written documentation from the Planning Commission, and maybe Mike, you could address that a little bit more, because we did have our meeting is recommended with the developer under our site plan requirements under 1175.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bowles, but if you could repeat what the question might be.
The requirements in our code 1157.05, 4 and 5, we addressed that the survey plat with the churches, the lease agreement, we could address that some more, because that's part of our application.
As far as the survey plan itself?
Yeah, but we have a section here regarding written documentation showing that the owner of the property, which the tower is located, has agreed with the terms. Have they agreed with the terms that they're represented in the church?
The church has a signed lease with TowerCo.
No, that wasn't the question. Could you ask that question again?
The question I have is, is there written documentation with the application from the church?
We sent a memorandum of lease, I think, as part of our application.
Okay.
Uh,
And all the comments are there, Mr. Chairman?
Okay,
Okay,
Tim, you
yes, sir. Again, Mr. Schuster, and I believe you touched on this perhaps in the prior meeting that we had with your initial application. The efforts that TowerCo may have had in perhaps locating other areas that may not have as much of an impact for that area in that community. I believe you said you had looked at some other cases. Could you provide evidence of that good faith effort?
I can give you a brief description of what was done, basically. Looking at the city of North Canton and the city of Canton area, this is a very, very small search area, about a quarter mile in diameter. And in fact, almost the entire search area was over top of First Friends Church. Taking a look at the zoning ordinance and the setbacks that are required to the property lines, this is the only large parcel that's out there that we might be able to use. So this is the area that we selected in working together with the church and trying to meet the setbacks and all the requirements of the wireless telecommunications ordinance of the city of North Canton.
Yes, sir. My other question is, there's the term of art that they use of categorically excluded facilities as far as FCC review. You're familiar with that?
No, I am not
No?
familiar with that, and I don't think there's any categorically excluded sites that I have ever known of.
No, I mean, as far as a facility, a tower setup, that the way it's put together, the term is categorically excluded.
I'm not sure what you're asking,
No?
Mr. Fox.
Okay. Maybe I'll come back to it in a little bit.
Mr. Chairman.
anything further, Tim?
Not at this time, Mr.
Was there any consideration to put any sort of equipment on the building, the existing church building?
It really not, because the church building is only steeple-wise and light entry-wise, and light is only about 40 to 50 feet in height. We're looking for something 140 feet in height. Trying to add to that structure to try to do that would be quite a structural endeavor.
Okay, at this point, I'll open it up to public comments. We're dealing with two issues on this. One
Mr.
is-
Chairman, if I can interrupt just briefly, I have just a couple of questions of clarification from Mr. Pitcher on counsel for TowerCo, and then some of the other representatives may have questions for Mr. Pitcher as well.
Well, can we hold those till later?
I think now would be the logical time, with all respect, if we would agree, Tim, probably to complete his testimony and offer any
Well, I
cross-examination.
mean, the commission is going to have comments too, and there may be some generated.
I'd leave it to
I
discretion.
represent the property owner,
Yes.
which is First French Church, and I'd like to make some comments with respect to Mike's comments at future witness.
I would allow it if you would be brief, please.
Yeah, Mike, if you would please take this seat so that we can get everything on the record. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that accommodation.
But I would imagine there would be others you would want testimony from.
No, our presentation is going to be from Mr. Pitcher that you heard earlier. I just have a couple of questions to fill in some holes, if you will, to make sure that we're covering all of the requirements of your particular ordinances.
Okay.
So again, just to back up a second and introduce myself, my name is Jim Matthews. I'm a lawyer here in town with Baker Duplicard and on the street. With me tonight is an associate from our office, Tanya Rogers. And in addition to Mr. Pitcher, we have Jason Woodberger as another representative from TowerCo. And I am privileged to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to be representing TowerCo and to address this matter to your attention tonight. Mr. Chairman, I will not belabor the testimony that Mr. Pitcher has already offered. I just have a few additional things and then some comments to briefly add, if I may. Thank you, sir. Copies to distribute. Mr. Pitcher, you've done a fine job on giving your narrative testimony tonight. A few questions I have for you as follows. You talked about the tower formation, construction configurations, and one of the provisions in the local ordinance deals with any climbing pegs that may be on the tower itself. Can you tell the members of the commission how any tower pegs or climbing pegs that are on the tower will be handled in this project?
Yeah, this is something that we typically do when we're against something like this, is usually the ordinances end up reading that they don't let that people or the public to have the ability or be able to climb the tower. Typically, the climbing pegs on the pole are physically pegs. They're not rungs or ladder or anything else. They're pegs off the surface of the tower. What we typically do is remove those pegs to a certain height where you actually need a ladder or some other type of device in order to be able to get up to it. Typically, we will end up removing those pegs to at least a 20-foot height in order to be able to eliminate that possibility. Typically, though, the pegs usually do go all the way to the bottom of the tower, so it would allow free access. But in this particular case, to meet that ordinance, we will be removing the pegs that we necessarily need to meet that ordinance.
Thank you, Mike. Mike, the application documents that are before the commission tonight, number 1 through 18 in support, the document that you have in front of you, I'd like you to, we'll have marked as number 19 just to keep things in order. And I wonder if you could please identify that document for the members of the commission tonight.
By my reading, the first paragraph here, this is a ground lease agreement between First Friends Church and TowerCo 2013 LLC.
Previously, we had submitted what's called a memorandum of agreement, identifying kind of the bare bone terms. Is this the actual ground lease for the site in question that's at issue tonight?
To my knowledge, yes, it is.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just have another thing to distribute here. Mr. Chairman. No, this is different. No. Oh, I do have another one. Oh, yeah. What I distributed for members of the commission for your consideration tonight is a summary of information drawn from your local ordinances that are pertinent to conditional use applications, as well as the specific provisions applicable to conditional use approval for cellular telecommunication towers. This is intended to do a couple of things. Number one, it is intended to be a summary to make it easier for the provisions that have to be satisfied in this instance. And this is also then, secondly, meant to augment the narrative summary that was provided as part of the application package. And I believe if you look at the two of those together, they comprehensively address all of the provisions that need to be dealt with in your consideration of this application. It is not my intention to sit here and go through each of the items. What we have offered for you is our statement of compliance on the right side of the document, which I believe has been satisfied through the narrative testimony of Mr. Pitcher tonight, supplemented with a couple of questions that I had for him. What you'll see on this document is not only the general criteria for conditional uses, but also the procedural issues involved. And we have satisfied all of the procedures. They are minimal, and we have satisfied those items. Then importantly, when you get to the particulars dealing with conditional use permits and approvals for cell towers. In listening to Mr. Pitcher's testimony, each of those items has been addressed. Again, when you consider the supplement that I offered through a few questions that I had. Another remark that I want to offer for your consideration, the reason that we've included the lease proper as an exhibit in addition to the memorandum of lease is to address the question posed by Mr. Bowles with respect to any necessary approvals from the landowner on this site. The lease language itself, and please understand, it's my position that the lease and its meaning between the two parties is not something that's material for your consideration. But in any event, the substance of what the property owner has committed to is important for you to consider. On page 1, under section 2 in particular, you'll see that the lessee, the property owner, lessor, has agreed to cooperate with TowerCo in obtaining all licenses and permits required for the utilization of this premises for the subject matter of the lease, which is the operation of the telecommunications tower. In addition, you'll see that there's a specific provision in the lease that provides the lessor further agrees to cooperate in executing and delivering any documents requested by lessee to obtain government approvals necessary for its intended use. I'll be candid with you. Since there's no particular form required on a document that indicates the lessor's or owner's approval of proceeding with this application, the lease itself is a writing. It's signed by a representative of the property owner, and alone, standing by itself, satisfies the requirement of showing the approval of the property owner for this project going forward. I'll go ahead, Mr. Chairman, if I may, and just offer some remarks now. I know that others want to get to their questioning, so we'll start that sequence, if that's okay with you, sir.
You know, before he offers his remarks, he asked Mike to ask some questions on direct. Since I represent the property owner, I'd like to have an opportunity to ask some questions myself.
I certainly think others are entitled to question in light of this being a quasi-judicial format. I'm not offering this as a closing, but only some remarks to make sense of what testimony has been heard so far. This isn't going to foreclose you or anyone else from offering any other.
Well, normally, you have the direct examination and give the other lawyers an opportunity to provide.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have this gentleman near a mic, and I don't have his stated name on the record. It's going to be difficult to transcribe. So if you either just come up and share, I apologize.
So we want to get that, if you could, we want to make sure that we get it on the record. If you're not near the mic, we may not get that on the record.
You know, I don't care if he makes his comments now.
Thanks.
All right. These are going to be brief, and I'll address some final remarks later in the proceeding. What we're dealing with, and I think Mr. Bowles has done a good deal in trying to lay out the roadmap for you. That's not to suggest you don't know what it is that you're deciding tonight, but this does deal with a conditional use application. A conditional use, while being slightly tempered below a permitted use, is nonetheless, of course, a permitted, allowable use when the criteria expressly set forth in a piece of legislation are satisfied. Here, the criteria that are important are drawn from the applicable zoning legislation itself, and we have done our best in our summary, coupled with some narrative statement included in the application package to show compliance with all of the necessary items. Those legislative standards, of course, are the standards to be applied in this instance, and we believe that at this point in time we've satisfied the necessary elements to authorize the approval of this application. I do appreciate your consideration tonight. I know this is a lot of information, not only contained in the application, but through Mr. Pitcher's testimony. But on behalf of TowerCo, we do sincerely appreciate your cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.